with your host, James Kelly. For the next 60 minutes, we'll explore every aspect of writing, including how to create, format, and even sell your work. The phone lines are open at 731-1230. That's 731-1230 or toll free 1-866-820-KLAV. Now, let's get right. Here's your host, James Kelly.
Hello, and welcome to Aspects of Writing here on KLAV. I'm your host, James Kelly. On your computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAV1230am.com. We also broadcast live on YouTube.com. Just put youtube.com/Aspects of Writing, all one word, and you'll be there. The topic of today's show is children's stories. Our guests for today's show are Jason Hebert and Karl, Casey, Christon, along with my co-hosts Janet Corsi and Dana Michelli. Jason is the author of God's Garden Live. In God's Garden Live the Red Birds. Casey is the author of several children's books called Hanging with Casey. But before we get to our guest, my panel and I would like to read a few fun facts, and we're going to start off with Dana. Dana, are you there?
I am. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. E.E. Cummings wrote about 2,900 poems, 2 novels, and countless essays. He also wrote 4 stories for his daughter Nancy, which were published in a 1965 collection called Fairy Tales. The stories include The Old Man Who Said Why, The Elephant and the Butterfly, and The House That Ate Mosquito Pie. The most playful yarn, however, may be The Little Girl Named I, An Experiment with Nouns. At the end, the girl named I meets the girl named you. It's cute.
Very cute.
And Jen?
In 1938, young Scott Brooks asked a handful of famous authors if they would try writing a children's book. Most refused, but Gertrude Stein happily agreed. She had a half-written manuscript already sitting in her desk. The draft became The World is Round, a symbolic adventure about a girl who tries to make sense of the world. Here is a taste. Once upon a time, the world was round, and you could go on it round and round. Everywhere there was somewhere, and everywhere there were men and women, children, dogs, cows, pigs, little rabbits, cats, lizards, and animals. This is the way it was, and everybody, dogs, cats, sheep, rabbits, and lizards and children, all wanted to tell everybody all about it, and they wanted to tell about themselves. Rambling but philosophical, Stein even planted her famous phrase, "A rose is a rose is a rose," which she regularly sparkled in her work. In The World is Round, the girl named Rose carves it around a tree, forming an endless loop.
All right. And Casey?
Leo Tolstoy loved kids. At 21, the aristocrat opened a school for peasants on his estate. While writing Anna Karenina, he started working on school books for his students. Tolstoy wrote about his childhood, adapted Aesop's fables and Hindu stories, and penned playful fairy tales like Ivan the Fool and The Pheasant and the Cucumbers. When Tolstoy finished, he read the tales to his toughest critics, the tots at his school. He asked them for pointers and reworked the stories until the tough crowds softened. Tolstoy eventually published the stories in 2 premieres, the ABC book and the new ABC book, which became staples at Russian schools.
All right. And Jason?
In 1951, Holiday Magazine published Ernest Hemingway's Only Stories for Children, The Good Lion and the Faithful Bull. Hemingway likely wrote both fables for Adriana Ivanchich, his Venetian love interest, and her nephew. The Good Lion follows a winged, pasta-eating lion. He visits Africa, where he's bullied by other lions for being different. The big cat, however, never bites back. He stays cheerful, eventually flying away from his bullies, in Hemingway style.
Sounds like a neat story.
Yeah.
And I'll read the last one. James Baldwin's novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, is a story of a boy growing up in Harlem. Baldwin's children's books, like Little Man, tell a similar tale. A 4-year-old named TJ, based on Baldwin's young nephew playing ball in the streets. The story is a collage of his observations. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAB, along with my co-host, Dana Michelli, in Arizona today, and Janet Corsi. And on your computer, you can listen to this broadcast live at KLAB1230am.com. Our guests for today's show are authors Jason Hebert and Karl Christon, or KC. And now let's go over to Janet Corsi, and we're going to do a segment called Jan's Review. And today we're actually reviewing her book, The Secrets of Time.
I've read it. I've read it 2 or 3 or 1,500 times. And it starts off in her wildest dreams. Sarah Dobson would never have believed this story was about her. After all, the attractive 50-year-old widow has always been a pillar of her community. On any given day, the good people of Rose, North Carolina, can find Sarah in her office doing her clients' taxes, or on the soccer field coaching her girls' team, or in her kitchen cooking a feast for her children and grandchildren. While her life is busy and fulfilled, she is desperately lonely, and has been ever since the loss of her beloved husband, James. After the usually proper Sarah makes 2 very bad choices with 2 very inappropriate men, her life spins out of control. Soon Sarah is telling many lies, and she can't keep them straight. With no one to talk to, she confides in the grandfather clock in the living room. Little does Sarah know that Granddad has secrets of his own. One day, in a fit of despair, Sarah punches the clock, knocking loose a secret compartment. Inside, she finds letters dating back over a century, each one containing the shame secrets of men and women, each one begging for forgiveness for their sins. Eventually, Sarah slides her own letter inside, praying to find her way out of this mess. Will she lose her family, her best friend, or even her soul? Only time will tell.
All right. And where can we find information about your book?
You can go to my website, www.janetcorsi.com. You can also find it at www.thesecretsoftime.net. I'm on Amazon and Nook, not Nook. I don't know.
Book Nook, yeah.
Book Nook, yeah. You can call me at home. I'm in the book. I'm in that other book.
All right. And our show changed a little bit. Casey and I were just talking. It changed a little bit from what we had planned for today, but we're fortunate that we have a guest who stepped in for us, Jason Hebert. And Jason is married and the father of 5 beautiful children. He's the author of children's books, In God's Garden Live the Red Birds, and it's going to be a series of books, I believe. Is that correct, Jason?
That is correct.
Okay. The story of the Redbirds centers around the Redbirds' journey to make their family complete through the gift of adoption. And I'd like to know, what made you want to write this particular book, Jason?
My wife and I actually took this journey on our own. So we were feeling like we were called to expand our family, and not knowing how the process would lay out, we just basically put it in God's hands. We went into a lot of prayer, and we looked at all over the world, Honduras, Ethiopia, and when we ended up finding her, we realized that it was more than we could imagine. People would see us on the street and say, "Wow, you've really impacted her life," when they didn't know or understand the fact that she was the one impacting ours. So initially, I wrote the book as a gift for her, and when more people heard it, they thought that it was a message that needed to go out for families across the world, that really let them know that it's not just about finding family, it's about finding your forever family.
And I believe you know Dana. Dana is on the show with us today. And
yes, Dana's my fantastic editor of this book. She was wonderful. She was wonderful to work with.
Yeah. And Dana, you have a question for Jason? Dana, are you there? I think we lost Dana.
My compliment knocked her over.
She's my editor too, and you know what? She is wonderful.
One of the things we wanted to know is that all the books in this series deal with children, and I noticed that, you were going to be talking about like bullying and greed. You had mentioned that to me on the phone. How many books do you already have planned for this series?
There's actually 4 right now.
Okay, and they're all going to have a specific topic, or each one?
Yeah, basically what we wanted to do is, find topics that children deal with on a daily basis. I have small kids myself, and there's so many bad messages in the world that things that kids are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. There has to be scripture that we can, atone to those. So, In God's Garden Live the Redbirds talks about bringing families together. In God's Garden lives Sammy the Squirrel's dealing with greed. We're overwhelmed in our society with, too many things, too much stuff, and Sammy goes through those trials and tribulations. There's a story of Sally the skunk who deals with bullies, and they treat her differently because she smells a little differently, even though that's the intent and plan for her. And then there's a story of the family of bears who deal with the loss of a loved one. And, while many of us lament the fact of losing a husband or a wife or a sibling, a lot of times we forget that our children are there as bystanders and they see the same thing. So really it's just trying to help them.
Well, Dana's back on air with us. Dana, you are there, right?
I am. I seem to have brought my technical difficulties with me across the country.
They follow you wherever you go.
They followed me.
Well, we're talking. With Jason.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna let you know we do have Jason, and we're talking to him about his book. And I read your question.
You guys couldn't hear me. I was saying how wonderful this book is. Jason's book is just, I loved it. Loved it.
Well, thank you. That means a great deal to me.
It was amazing.
It was only good after you did the edits.
Oh, no, not at all.
That's why she's saying.
That is an outright untruth.
Now, Dana was very nice in telling me about you, Jason, and that she said there was really very little work she had to do, that was very good.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's been wonderful.
Well, I think your books sound absolutely marvelous. My daughter was 5 when my mother passed away, and there were no books for me to explain or help her understand what was going on. I wish your books had come out sooner. But tell me, who is your publisher?
Actually, it's kind of like the business, the Hollywood business. If you don't know anybody, it's hard to break in.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at self-publishing. I looked at print-on-demand scenarios, and I thought, I've poured my life into this, and I really wanted to take it to the finish line. So, not knowing how to find a publisher, I created a publisher. I started a company on the side called 5 Angels Publishing, and I thought to myself, if this is something that I can get this book series off the ground and get things running, I would love to have the opportunity to help other authors who truly own their intellectual property to get it out to the world. So that may come somewhere down the pipe, but right now that was the avenue I took.
Oh, very good.
And you also will be, I think you're going to have another version of the book, a softcover version you're going to have available on Ingram Spark soon.
Yeah, actually I was approached by some people at Ingram, and their bookseller for the children's Christian book area really loves the book. And I thought, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to make something that's kind of a midpoint. We have the hardcover book at $15.99 and the ebook, on sale via Amazon at $2.99. So we're going to make a softcover book that's going to be distributed to all of Ingram's contacts at $7.99. So we're pretty excited about that.
Wow, that's good. And where can we learn more about your book?
We actually have our own website, ingodsgardenlives.com. Tell you a little bit about each one of the stories and a little bit about us and things that we have that are exciting going on, like being on this wonderful show.
All right.
Fantastic.
Well, and you're going to stick with this because we have a lot more to talk about after we interview KC, right? You're going to stay here, Jason?
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
All right. All right. You are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAB, and my co-host are Dana Michelle Lynn Janet Corsi. Our guests are Karl, Christon, and Jason Hebert, and we're going to go right into interviewing KC here. KC's been on the show several times. KC, you're the author of a series of children's books called Hanging with KC. So please tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to become a writer of children's stories.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure to come. What's the question?
What made you decide to write
what made me
stories?
decide to write children's books? Well, I always thought of myself as a writer. The 2-minute version of the 2-minute version is when I began to research the reading levels, reading ability, the state of reading as a whole in this country, the information was quite dismal. And when you begin to dissect that information, it became even more dire in ethnic communities.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I noticed early on was that there was not a lot of diverse reading material for children. So obviously, if you don't have anything that you enjoy reading, you're probably not going to do it.
Right.
I'm from the generation of you can't complain about something if you're doing nothing about it.
That's exactly right.
So I decided with my good friend Ricky to do something about it, and we created the Hanging with Casey children's book series. It's a modular series. We firmly believe in reading for entertainment value and not necessarily always having to teach a lesson. I think that's one of the things that we could do better with when it comes to children's literature. Children spend 8 hours a day at school. Oftentimes they don't want to have to come home and learn again. I mean, when we come home from work, we don't want to have to work at home.
Keep going to work.
You want to put your feet up, have a drink, relax.
Right.
Watch television, watch a book, or read a book rather. So the same concept should be when it comes to children's literature. From my point of view, I want to give them something that will help them relax and be enjoyable, and not necessarily put them in the mind state of
What
academic.
did you learn today? Yeah.
This is. I want you to do this because you like to do it, because you have to do it. So, in a nutshell, that's what the Hanging with Casey book series is all about.
So you never set out to be an author. It was something that you just decided, I'm going to do this because we need this.
Well, I wanted to write professionally. I wrote a few treatments, had the opportunity to do some things on a small scale in television, but I saw that I was pretty good at coming up with storylines, etc. So I said, well, let me try my hand with literature. But then again, when you're writing literature, there's so many genres: romance, sci-fi, etc., etc. I began to target my writing toward children because I drew back on my experience.
Right.
I wasn't a great reader in school. I saw how that affected my academic career, and so I really just wanted to help. I said, hey, let me give them something they can identify with. Hopefully they'll like it, and it will be encouraging. It will encourage them to make that choice for their entertainment selection.
Well, I was
that's a book. Yeah.
I'd like to know a little bit more about the author. We have never discussed this before. You just mentioned you had tried to write in other areas. Did you ever do anything with it?
No. I was sitting there contemplating.
Oh, okay.
Do I write romance? Do I write science fiction? Do I write crime novels? And like everyone here, I'm sure you want your work to mean something.
Correct.
To feel like you are contributing, making a positive contribution.
Well, I want to thank you for furthering my career. And by that, what I mean is, if he gets kids reading and they enjoy it, and
that's true.
When you see his characters, you just want to know them. You want to meet them. You want to play with them. And so when those kids get involved in his books, then they're going to get involved in my books when they become an adult. And so he's furthering my career, so I'm going to do everything I can to further his.
Right on, right on. You know, it's something that is if children can develop a love for reading and are literate, it is something they will truly carry with them for the rest of their life. And it's an invaluable tool. Who doesn't read every day? Something.
Right, every
Well,
day.
yeah, we read something every day.
Every day.
But it's shocking to know the number of people in the United States who can't.
Well,
Yeah.
And it's something we take for granted.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who have trouble when it comes to reading. I read a statistic that said 85% of all juvenile offenders have reading problems. Those that are incarcerated, a large portion are illiterate. In a country where school is free, quote unquote, the first 12 to 13 years of your life, I find that to be totally outrageous and unacceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know as a kid, and I've heard teachers say this, when a kid says they're bored, they're not really bored. They just don't know what's going on.
Right.
And if you can't read, you won't know what's going on. So it's real important to get the little guys started, get them interested, fuel them, you know?
That's right. They need to get into the habit as early as possible, which is why I write for beginning readers. It's critical.
Absolutely.
I was with a good friend of mine the other day, Will Edwards, and we were talking about it because we were talking about scholastic problems here in Clark County, and school is nothing but reading. So if a child doesn't like to read, odds are he's not going to like school. Doesn't like school, he's out of there the first chance he gets. And we all know the problems that are associated with dropping out of high school. Now you're underemployed, unemployed, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that can possibly change if a child is literate and enjoys reading.
Yeah.
Well, I know you, and I know that you're very passionate about getting kids to learn to read. And I think what you said is very important, and it's really what both you and Jason are doing, is you're writing stories that kids would want to read. They have characters. You know, it's something that someone's going to want to read when they're not in school. Because I think the problem in school as well is that the classes are so big, they just tend to move on without you. Whether you stay up with the class or not, they move on without you.
Right.
And, you know, the teacher doesn't have time to come back and say, are you getting this?
Sure.
Do you understand this? They don't have that one-on-one time with each student.
Right.
So at least if they have something alternative to read when they get home, it may help them in some way.
You're absolutely right, James. You know, I did a presentation 2 weeks ago for Acero's Head Start program. And that's one of the things that I told the parents there. You know, at the very least, your child needs to be able to keep up. They have to be able to keep up with the class. We're asking our teachers to do more with less every year. So the parent or guardian has to take ownership of their child's education, and one of the ways that they could take ownership is making sure that their child has a healthy attitude towards education and is literate, and that they actually read. I tell them, I say, there's 3 things I need you to do for me. One thing is to have your child see you read.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean the instructions to the VCR,
Right.
the DVD player.
You're telling age there.
But they need to see you read newspaper, magazine. Number 2, have some reading material around the house.
Yes.
You know,
Age-appropriate stuff for them, too.
I'm working with Reading Readiness Roundup. They asked me to be on that committee. And one of the things that we are determined to do is get reading material in the homes of underprivileged children, because it's shocking to find out how many households don't have anything for them to read.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is to naturally read with your child. The parent is the biggest influence on a child's life. So,
but one of the questions I have for you with that scenario is, if you have someone who is illiterate themselves, how are they going to read with their child? I mean, how do you address that problem?
Well, that's actually a larger concern than we would believe in this city. One of the things that I always stress to parents or guardians is the fact that, I know you want better for your child than what you want your child to excel.
Yeah.
To advance, if you will, from where you are. One of the ways they can do that is to take advantage of their education. Now, the point that you made, every time I go to a public school and I speak with the administrators, the teachers, they are there to help. They want to help. And their biggest concern is that enough parents are not utilizing them to assist them with their child's education. So if a parent has problems reading, that's something they should speak candidly about with their child's teachers, the principal, even the librarian. These people have these jobs because they want to help.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there they're not teachers to drive a business. Yeah, they're there because they want to be a positive player, if you will, in the community.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the absolute first place you could start. Libraries hold workshops all the time. Speak to some of the administrative staff there. Again, these people want to help.
Yeah.
That's why they have the career, the job that they have. So,
well, James hit on something that that is very interesting, because my dad had dropped out of school in 3rd grade, and that was back in 1930-something or 1920-something. And he used to read to us at night, and his favorite story was Rapunzel. Of course, that's Rapunzel. And I'm not sure to this day that he ever actually read a single word in the story, but that's what he got out of it, was Rapunzel instead of Rapunzel.
Right.
And she's always been Rapunzel to me.
There's even community organizations that are willing to help, that whole workshop classes. Las Vegas Urban League. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but there are places that's what they do.
Well, I think the message that needs to get out there is, even with parents, if they have a problem, they should approach the school themselves and speak to the teacher and say, I want my child to excel, but I unfortunately have a problem. And maybe that's one way of handling it. You don't even have to tell the child necessarily, so that they can get the help that they need.
And teachers have a long list of resources. And the vast majority of these resources are free of charge.
Yeah.
It's just all they ask for is some initiative.
Yeah. And there's even places like, I know here in Las Vegas, the Barnes & Nobles, local Barnes & Nobles, they have children's reading groups where parents can bring their children, where the author sits there and reads the book to the children.
Oh, wonderful.
So those are other avenues that even if a parent is having problems, because we live in a multicultural society here in Las Vegas, and so if they do send some homework home, if you're from a Hispanic background or you're from Ethiopia or wherever, you may not understand the lesson anyway. So there are other avenues you just have to search for and find, and help your child learn that way.
Absolutely.
Our point of today's show is the importance of children's stories, in that we can't forget how important this is, in the sense that we've got to get children reading more. Yeah. Because we take for granted that they know what they're doing by the time they get to high school, that they can read, and we all know from statistics that the average reader is on a 5th grade level.
Yeah.
And that's across the board, nationwide.
That's sad.
You're absolutely right. I had the privilege to work with some junior high and even some high school students earlier this year. And I'll tell you, some of the writing levels that ninth graders had was unbelievable. It was, and unfortunately, it was unbelievable in a bad way. We've got to bring this to the forefront. And like I was saying with my friend Will, this is a tough city to do this in because we build ourselves as the entertainment capital of the world. We're a tourism-generated economy. So if you fall outside the lines of what we deem "quote unquote" important to the city, the functionality of the city, it's sort of a uphill battle, But we have, as a community, have got to be more accountable when it comes to our young people and their attitude towards education, and we've got to promote this, because the reality is, our young people aren't stupid. They're looking at a principal who's got a PhD, who went to school for 12 years, and every time he turns around, his job is on the line.
Yeah.
He's getting pay cuts. And then he looks at the billboard, and there's that DJ making $4 million a year.
Yeah, right.
Or more.
Yeah.
Or I've read some of them are making 11.
Yeah.
$11 million a year. So you do the math.
Yeah.
Do I want to go to school for 12 years and always have to worry about having my job?
Yeah.
Or I could just get up there and
spin records.
Now you dating yourself. Spin some records and make $11 million a year and live like,
I want to see Jen spin records and make $11 million a year.
Yeah, my face is on the billboard and
I'll do it for $11 a night.
So, and that's fine. If you command that price and someone wants to give it to you, more power to you.
Oh, absolutely.
It's $85 a gallon for coffee.
But as most of us don't live like that,
right,
or have that skill level,
right.
So we have to talk about what's important and what the reality of the situations are.
Yeah.
And I just think that we could do a much better job doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of something that's important, I'm interested in knowing who's your favorite character in your books and how come?
Oh, me?
Yeah, you.
It's your book.
It's your book.
Well, all of the characters are based off of childhood personalities, even relatives. I'm going to go out on a limb with this one, and I have many, many reasons. But my favorite character in the book is Dad. Dad is my favorite character in the book. Because, the stories are based loosely off me growing up in the city. And reflecting on that, writing these stories, my father, I had a buddy, his name was Ronald Washington. His father, my uncle Mike, who lived literally one block over. These were the centers of our neighborhoods. And a lot of young men didn't have fathers who were there.
Yeah.
And, of course, the situation has escalated. I think it's 1 in 4 households now. And back in the 78, it was maybe 10%. Maybe 10%. Now it's 25%. But I've come to appreciate the value of that person being there.
Yeah.
My brother and I would go out with my dad throwing football. We thought we would be playing just us three. But in 10 minutes or less, half the neighborhood would be there.
Yep.
I would get a little, hey, don't you see I'm trying to?
Yeah.
But now I understand, they didn't have that father figure.
Right.
So he's, while you don't see him, his face or much of him physically, he's central to the story because that is what in a lot of respects, was holding those neighborhoods together.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at some of these cities like Philadelphia, New Orleans, Chicago, that are having tremendous challenges in those cities, that's one of the underlying factors. There's not a lot of male figures that have import in those households.
Yeah.
Households transitions to neighborhoods, neighborhoods transition to communities.
Yep.
Town, city, state, country.
Yep.
So that's actually why that's one of my favorite characters.
And Dana, you have a question for Casey?
Yeah, I was wondering who your publisher is and how did you get hooked up with them?
Well, just like Jason, I explored many avenues, and I'm one of those guys that will not take no for an answer. I decided to do it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually working with Ingram too. Good company, great company actually. But I wasn't going to wait on the traditional publishers, sorting through agents. If all and it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because when all of that comes, now I fully understand the business.
Right.
And I almost think that's something everyone should do first before they attempt to go with Scholastic, Simon & Schuster, et cetera, because you got to remember, it's still a business.
Yeah.
And if
even when you go beyond self-publishing, like you said, if you have a traditional publisher, I think it's a misconception that they do everything for you, and it's just not that way. Yeah.
Huge.
So you're right. Self-publishing really does lead the way. So that if a publisher picks you up, you know what to do. You know
what to say. You know what the jargon is. You know what to ask, and you know if they're pulling your leg.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what you're willing to accept.
I've talked to a lot of authors, unfortunately, that have learned that the hard way, and it's costly.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into the next part of the show. I'm going to ask you, Casey, where can we learn more about your books?
Well, that's a great question, James.
Go to Jan's Facebook page.
I'm in a few stores locally, always looking to expand. I'm in.
Are you on Amazon?
I'm on Amazon.
You have Hangin' with Casey, which is your website.
www.hanginwithkasey, Hangin' with Casey. I'm on Barnes & Noble. I'm in their catalog. I'm in Amazon's catalog. I'm in just about any place you could buy books online. I'm in their catalog. If you want to go to a brick and mortar in town, if I'm not on their shelf, it's very easy for them to pull me up. I'm probably in their online catalog, even if they don't know it.
All right, we're going to move to the next part of the show because we've got to get to talking about writing children's stories.
Right.
So you are listening to Aspects of Writing with me, your host, James Kelly, here on KLAV. Dana Michelle and Janet Corsi are my co-hosts, and we have with us in the studio Casey, who writes Hanging with Casey, and then we have Jason Hebert, who is the author of In God's Garden Live the Red Birds. And now this is going to be for the whole panel. We're going to discuss the whole topic of writing children's stories. As you've already heard at the top of the show, many accomplished authors have also penned children's stories. Why do you think that is? Jason, why do you think that is?
Because it's difficult.
People think that writing a children's story is an easy process, but in reality, I think it's harder.
Well, it is harder because I'll say it's equally hard because you have to take yourself out of your own shoes and go back to some eyes you haven't used in a long time. Right. Our kids' eyes are filled with wonderment, innocence, and those are things that seem to be hard to come by in our society today. So you have to take a different path to get there.
Well, I think the one thing you have to do is you definitely have to put yourself on their level. You have to think like a child in like what's going to keep their interest, and it's really difficult. I've written a couple, and nothing's happened with them. But the point is that from writing those two, I realized someone will say, well, that word's too big for this age group.
Right.
You know? So you have to think of all of that when you're writing these stories, and how are they going to grasp it? What are they going to see in their minds?
Well, without a doubt, you both are absolutely right. And that's one of the things that was one of the biggest questions that I had to ask myself when I started my series. Well, what does a 7-year-old know? I'm a grown man writing children's book stories, so one of the things that helped me was to reflect back when I was a child.
Right.
But also, we've got to, he's absolutely right about it's difficult. You have to be on point with your illustrator, too.
Oh, that's important.
They've got to understand, because if you're writing for children, oftentimes, they can't read. So they're looking at pictures, and they're getting the story through the illustrations. So if your illustrator's got the character running with scissors,
Yeah.
that's not good.
It's not cool.
You just hit on something that's so key to the children's stories as well, and that is the illustrations.
Yeah.
Like with Jason's book with the red birds. Obviously, you want to have red birds.
Right.
Because actually a child can grasp and read what that word is if it's printed under, that illustration,
Right.
if that quote's there. They can start relating words to the pictures.
Right.
So that's a
Absolutely.
very, very important part of writing for children.
Absolutely. Illustration is well, that's 50% of your product. And being on the same page with your illustrator is a huge part of the process. It takes a whole lot of work. It's funny because people, when you tell them what you do, oh yeah, I want to do it.
Well, I've seen a video of yours we're going to
Okay.
use in the future for something. It's about 11 minutes. And, really, when you look at that video, you see just how in-depth and how much thought process went into writing those series of books that you have.
Man, it's,
By the way, that's a great video, just so you know.
thank you.
It's on YouTube. I don't know what it's called, but I happened to run across it.
I don't.
But anyway, it really shows you what it takes to illustrate. When you're working with the illustrator, the key questions you need to ask. And it's funny how you work back and forth with this whole
Man, I'll tell you
subject
something.
to characters.
Last week, we just started working on a storyboard for our fourth book, and it took us all day. And we're just, not even any hard sketches, just the storyboard, the timeline. You would think the story is rather simple. But when you start, what type of, how are we going to do this? So then, you have to decide on certain aspects of illustrations. It could be very, very involved.
Yeah. I've dealt with a few illustrators in the past, and unfortunately, I have to say, none of them turned out the way I wanted. But one of the things that is important when you're writing the stories, you visualize it. And trying to get that on paper, if you're not an illustrator, it's kind of difficult to verbally let the illustrator know what you want to see on paper, unless they grasp everything you've written,
Right.
which isn't always the case. So, it's really hard to get what you want,
Well, I found that it makes sense to, take a little bit longer and try to find somebody that has some of the same likes and interests as you.
Yes.
Luckily, I found an illustrator that, had a heart for mission work, that she was doing these types of things. So when we sat down, we started, like you was talking about, storyboarding. It's okay to say, no, I don't like that.
Yes.
But somebody who's kind of seeing the same concept going from cradle to grave, that's a pretty amazing thing. It works out very well in the end.
Jason's absolutely right. And one of the things that has worked so well with us on my series is that Rick is from Detroit, and I'm from the Midwest, a large city in the Midwest. So when I was being descriptive, he understood what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get an illustrator from Huntington Beach, and
Right.
I'm trying to describe, cityscapes.
Right.
And one other thing that he said that's right on the money is, your illustrator's got to be just as excited about the project as you.
That's
It
what's
can't
really key.
just be another job for him or her. I've talked to I'd say probably a half a dozen authors who just given me nightmare scenarios about their illustrator. And that's one of the main causes. It was just another job for them. So it's take it or leave it. Well, after you invested X amount of dollars, X amount of months, what do?
Yeah.
So yeah, take a few extra weeks to sift through candidates. I found many talented illustrators that all do excellent work within their own right, but I settled for Rick because of those two factors. He was from a large city, and he got what I was trying to do, why I was trying to do it, and he was 100% on board. So it has been truly a great partnership up to this point.
We're going to talk a little bit about how to structure your children's story. And Aaron Shepard wrote a book called The Business of Writing for Children. And in it he writes, avoid preaching when it comes to the theme. Children's stories should be explorations of life, not Sunday school lessons. Like, you don't want to shove it down their throat. Keep your theme positive. If writing about a social problem, offer constructive ways for your readers to deal with it. Dana, did you have something to add?
Yes, and the plot is normally built around a conflict involving the main character. However, a story may succeed without conflict, especially if it's for preschoolers, but not without another device that holds their attention. A novel may have several conflicts, but a short story or picture book should only have one.
And Jen?
Yeah, at the beginning, jump right into the action. At the end, bring the story to a prompt close. Keep structure as simple as possible. In a picture book, keep the action in chronological order without any flashbacks. Whether in first or third person, the story should generally be told through the eyes of a single character, usually the main character. This is called point of view. Sudden shifts in the story's point of view can jolt or disorient the reader.
And Jason?
Characters. Before you start writing, know your characters thoroughly. Your main character should be someone the reader can identify or sympathize with. He or she should be near the top age of your intended readers. Identify your characters with one or more telling details, physical traits, a mannerism, a favorite phrase, for instance.
And Casey?
Your setting should be in a place and time that will be interesting or familiar. Style and tone, you should write simply and directly, in short words, sentences, and or short phrases.
The strongest children's stories have well-developed themes, engaging plots, suitable structure, memorable characters, well-chosen settings, and attractive style. For best results, build strength in all areas. And we hit on quite a few points there. You have to, I don't know how you guys write, but one children's story that I wrote, I actually had to outline. I outlined it and tried to figure out how do I want this to flow, what message am I trying to send.
Well, I outline all my children's stories.
Right. Well, one I did not. I wrote one in 1 hour. I don't know how it reads, but Dana, you have it. I don't know if you've read it yet or not, but but that one just came to me. But
Right.
Usually, I know when you're writing a children's story, it's just like a novel. You have to
Absolutely.
lay it out.
Right.
I think people think, well, it's because it's a children's story, it's simple. No. You still have to figure
Still
out
a story.
the plot, the structure,
Right.
who the main character is. You just have to...
Beginning, middle,
right.
end. Right.
In many ways, it's more difficult because you're using less words to tell the story.
Right.
And
you're condensing, depending on the type of writing or story.
Again, you do have the illustrator to help emphasize and, lend its hand in the story. So,
and you've got to keep the adult who may be reading the story to the kid engaged as well.
Yeah,
You can't go, oh, this is a snorer.
You know
close
what?
it up, and now the kid's done too.
Right.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the more important points too, because that's actually the question I said to my illustrator, Rick. I said, what is going to be the parent's reaction when they tell the child to go get a book and they bring Hanging with Casey back?
Yeah.
Is it going to be, oh, great, not this book again, go get another one? Or is it going to be, oh, I love that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's read that one. So, to a certain extent, you have 3 different factors that you always have to be mindful of when you're writing children's literature. Your illustrations, the actual content, and your readers who are going to be different from children to grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about multi-generational readers that have to enjoy your product.
That's right. Yeah.
That's it could be a handful.
Well, you kind of have to keep the parent in mind when you're writing as well.
Sure.
Because you want something that they're going to enjoy reading to that child.
Right.
And something that they feel like is worthwhile for that child to read. So you're going to have a parent who probably sees this book and picks it up and reads it first. Sometimes the child will bring it to them.
Well, yeah, more than likely,
when they go to the bookstore, though, that
right,
parent's there.
The consumer, right? They're buying the book, so they're going to pick it up, flip it. Hopefully, your book has gotten to a point where children insist on it, but
yeah,
but still,
that's the goal. Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah, you have to make it appealing for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Jason, you have anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree. If you look at stories, not just in books, but for movies, TV, things like Shrek, they're masterful in that not only they bring in the visual aspects, they put little hooks for the parents.
Yeah.
Little tiny things that the kids will never get that bring the parents along and say, wow, that's a neat little concept. That's something really great. One of the things that I looked at in doing my book was to try to reinforce some of these ideas by memorization. So, as Dana can tell you, my book rhymes.
Oh.
So, the whole way through, I wanted little hooks for the children.
Right.
So even though they may not understand developed concepts, memorization by repeating the same thing over again, you hope that it's something that's kind of sinks in. So that's one of the things we tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
Little green eggs and ham there, huh?
Well, Jack and Jill. I always will remember the Jack and Jill series.
Oh, yeah.
In school.
Yeah.
They were always in rhyme.
My books have a rhyming pattern too, and it was for word recognition.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I thought it would be easier.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We're down to the last couple minutes of the show.
Already?
Oh, we're already.
Boy,
and I would like to thank our guests, Jason Hebert and Karl Christon, or Casey, along with my co-hosts Janet Corsi and Dana Michelli. Our next show, or the next live broadcast, will be on July 15th at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. For our future guest lineup, please visit our website at aspectsofwriting.com. Aspects of Writing broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 2 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on KLAV 1230 on the AM dial or on your computer at KLAV1230am.com. This show will be broadcast on VegasAllNetRadio.com every Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Please visit the website to view our show and date and time. Our past shows are also archived on VegasAllNetRadio.com. To view the recorded version of this show, go to youtube.com/Aspects of Writing, and Aspects of Writing is all one word, on your computer. This show will be posted immediately after the broadcast. I say immediately. It's usually about an hour. Until next time, this is your host, James Kelly, reminding you, if you can dream it, you can write it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you, Jason.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.